There is a book on my kitchen shelf that I have never thrown away. It is a copy of Robert's Rules of Order, paperback, spine cracked in 3 places. I bought it at a Barnes & Noble in Naperville, Illinois in the spring of 2019, the week I agreed to fill a vacant seat on our HOA board of directors. I thought I was going to help my neighbors. I thought I was going to fix something small. I want you to remember that book. It matters later, and not in the way I expected. But let me tell you the thing first. The thing I need you to hear before we go anywhere else. In the 5 years between the day I joined that board and the day Craig Hartfield resigned in front of 90 residents and 2 attorneys, I watched a man use a Homeowners Association like a private ATM. I watched him drain a reserve fund from $312,000 to $68,000. I watched him prepare to charge 240 families an extra $400 a month to cover up money that was already gone. And I watched him come after me personally, my professional reputation, my neighbors, my livelihood, when I started asking where the money went. I am not telling you this story for sympathy. I am telling you this because what Craig Hartfield did at Creekside Terrace is not rare. It is not an anomaly. It is happening right now in subdivisions across this country, and most homeowners will never know until a special assessment letter lands in their mailbox and they are already holding the bag. If you own a home in an HOA, or if you are thinking about buying one, this is the story I wish someone had told me first. What do you check before buying into an HOA? Tell me in the comments. I want to know what you thought mattered, because what actually matters surprised even me. My name is Fatima Khalil. I am 57 years old. Came to the United States from Beirut when I was 19 with my mother, $80, and a habit I have had since childhood of reading every document twice. My mother taught me that. She said, in this world, what you do not read, someone else will use against you. She was a woman who checked the math on every grocery receipt and never signed anything without her reading glasses. I am my mother's daughter in that way. I spent 11 years as a federal bank examiner for the FDIC. I reviewed community bank financials, identified compliance failures, and wrote findings that sometimes ended careers. After that, I went into private practice, a financial compliance consulting firm based out of Chicago, working with community banks and credit unions on regulatory preparation. I have sat across tables from CFOs who thought their books were clean and showed them exactly where they were not. I know what honest numbers look like. I know what managed numbers look like. And I know the specific texture of a document that has been arranged to look like something it is not. I am telling you that background right now because it is the thing Craig Hartfield never thought to consider. He saw a quiet woman in her 50s at a neighborhood board meeting, speaking with a slight accent, driving a 10-year-old Honda Accord. He saw someone who would not sign the papers he placed in front of her and not ask the wrong questions. He made his entire plan based on that assumption. I bought my home at 447 Creekside Court in March of 2018. 2-story colonial, 4 bedrooms, a small porch I planted with herbs that first summer. My youngest was finishing high school. My ex-husband had moved to Seattle the year before, and this house was, in every possible sense, a beginning. The neighborhood was clean, well-maintained, consistent landscaping, swept streets, the kind of development that makes you think the association is being managed by someone who pays attention. The HOA dues were $310 a month, high for the area but not unreasonable. Asked for a copy of the CC&Rs, the covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Before I closed, my real estate agent looked at me like I had asked for the Rosetta Stone. She found them. I read all 47 pages that weekend. I highlighted 11 clauses. Keep that in mind. Those 11 highlighted clauses come back. The first year I attended 2 board meetings. They were held in the community room at the clubhouse. About 12 residents would show up out of 240 homes. Craig Hartfield ran every meeting. He had been board president for 6 years at that point. He was 60 years old, silver-haired, the kind of man who wore a blazer to a neighborhood meeting and clearly expected you to notice it. He drove a black Escalade with a personalized plate. He spoke about Creekside Terrace with a particular pride, the kind of pride that is also a warning. I built this. Do not test me on it. In the spring of 2019, a board seat opened. Our treasurer, a retired pharmacist named Don Nakamura, was moving to Arizona. A note went up on the neighborhood Facebook group. Would anyone be willing to serve? I volunteered. I thought 2 years. I thought I could bring some structure to the finances, push for an independent audit, make myself useful. I thought that was a reasonable thing to do. I want to tell you exactly how long it took Craig Hartfield to decide I was a problem. 3 weeks after I was seated on the board, I requested access to the financial statements for the previous 3 fiscal years. Standard practice. A new board member has every legal right to review the association's financials. Craig told me they were being compiled. 4 weeks later, I asked again. He said he would send them by end of week. That was September of 2019. I did not receive those documents until I filed a formal written demand in November, citing the Illinois Condominium Property Act, which governs many planned unit developments and gives members and board officers the right to inspect financial records. 11 weeks. To receive documents I was legally entitled to as a seated board member, and when they finally arrived, I understood why he had stalled. I want you to remember one name. Hartfield Property Services. I am going to come back to it. I sat down with 3 years of financial statements and I started reading. What I found in the first 40 minutes, the landscape and line item had changed significantly 3 times in 4 years. Not small adjustments, fluctuations between $18,000 and $41,000 within a single fiscal year. On a 240-home subdivision, and the vendor receiving those payments was the same every single time. Hartfield Property Services. I kept reading. The reserve fund the account in HOA is required to maintain for major repairs, roofing, paving, infrastructure, showed a current balance of $68,000. A reserve fund study conducted in 2016 had recommended a minimum balance of $420,000 for a development our size, based on the age and replacement cost of our shared infrastructure. We had $68,000, 16% of the recommended level. I went back to my highlighted CC&Rs that night. Clause 14B, it required an independent financial audit every 3 years. I pulled the board meeting minutes from the past 6 years. The last independent audit had been conducted in 2014. 5 years of required audits. None conducted. I did not sleep well that week. Not because I was frightened, because I knew exactly what I was looking at, and I knew it was going to get complicated. And there was a small part of me that wished I had never asked for those documents. That feeling passed. The first time I raised the vendor name at a finance subcommittee meeting, Craig cut me off mid-sentence. He said very calmly, without looking up from his papers, "Mrs. Khalil, this really isn't your area." He did not elaborate. He moved the agenda item. The meeting ended 6 minutes later. He did not look at me again the entire drive to the parking lot. That phrase, "this isn't your area," I thought about it for 3 days. Then the meeting schedule changed. Craig stopped sending me the updated dates for the finance subcommittee. I would appear at the scheduled time to find the room dark and a note that the meeting had been held 2 days earlier. And that happened 3 times between October and December of 2019. I documented each instance with an email requesting the minutes. I received no response to any of them. And then the violation notices started arriving at my house. October 2019, an oil stain on my driveway exceeding the allowable dimensions under the architectural guidelines. Fine, $150. I photographed the driveway the same morning. There was no oil stain. I submitted a written appeal and requested the documentation supporting the finding. No response. November 2019, my mailbox post did not meet community standards. The mailbox had been installed when the house was built in 2004. Fine, $75. December 2019, My holiday decorations were non-compliant with Section 9C of the Architectural Review Guidelines. I checked Section 9C. It regulated commercial signage. Fine, $200. January 2020, my side gate latch was not code compliant. I have never installed a gate. The fines alone were not the point. I want you to understand that $225 in documented bogus fines was not a financial threat to me. The point was the message. The message was, I see you looking. If you keep looking, this gets worse. He was expecting me to calculate the cost of the fight and walk away. That was not the first time he had made that calculation for someone else. But I am getting ahead of myself. I found Donna Estrada through a professional contact at a Chicago compliance network. She is a CPO and HOA governance specialist based in Schaumburg, 44 years old, sharply efficient, the kind of person who answers your 2-minute question in 30 seconds and is always right. She had worked 3 prior Illinois HOA fraud cases. When I walked her through the financial statements and the vendor pattern, she was quiet for a moment. Then she asked one question. What is Craig Hartfield's brother's full name? His name was Dale. Dale Hartfield, owner of Hartfield Property Services, LLC, licensed in Will County, Illinois, since 2015. Her registered address, 14 Pineview Road, Bolingbrook. Craig had been directing HOA funds to his own brother's landscaping company for 6 consecutive years, without disclosure to the board or the membership, without competitive bidding as required by the CC&Rs for contracts over $5,000, without any board vote on record beyond his own signature approving the payments. But that was not the worst part. Donna and I spent 3 weeks building the paper trail. 46 invoices, 6 years of payments totaling $387,000 to Hartfield Property Services. We obtained comparative bids from 2 independent landscaping contractors for the identical scope of work. Fair market value for those services, approximately $201,000. The difference between what Craig's brother was paid and what it should have cost, $186,000. And at the exact same time this money was flowing out, the reserve fund was declining from $312,000 in 2013 to $68,000 in 2019, while Craig was approving annual budgets that showed healthy reserve contributions on paper. I want you to understand what I'm describing. A man had caused his own association to overpay his brother's company by $186,000 over 6 years. He had done it quietly, without disclosure, while the reserve fund meant to protect every homeowner's investment eroded down to almost nothing. And now he was planning to hold an annual meeting, tell 240 families that the reserve fund needed emergency replenishment, and call a vote to raise dues by $400 a month. Not to fix a genuine shortfall, to cover up a theft. Each of those families paying an extra $4,800 a year for money that was already gone. The annual meeting was scheduled for April 15th. We had 6 weeks. I need to tell you what happened in February, and because this is the part I still carry with me. In the space of 9 days, 3 things happened. First, I received a letter from a client, a small community bank in Joliet, informing me that they had received an anonymous complaint about my professional conduct and were placing our consulting contract under review pending investigation. Second, 2 neighbors who had been friendly to me for nearly 2 years began avoiding eye contact at the mailbox and on the street. Third, an account created that month on the Creekside Terrace Facebook group posted a vague message suggesting that a board member had been accessing personal financial information and using it for unclear purposes. No name, no evidence, just enough smoke to make people wonder. Have you ever had someone try to destroy not just your property, but your name? The deliberate, systematic effort to make the people around you doubt you before you can say a single word out loud. Because that is what this was. And I need to know I am not the only one who has sat with that particular feeling. Leave it in the comments if you have. because the loneliness of it, the way you suddenly cannot tell who knows and who doesn't, who believes and who doesn't, that is a specific kind of weight. Donna told me later that Craig had done a version of this before. In 2016, a board member named Patricia Gaines had started asking questions about the reserve fund. Within 3 months, her neighbor had received a letter claiming she had damaged their shared fence and refused to pay. Her daughter had received a bizarre phone call from someone claiming to represent the HOA about overdue dues that did not exist. Patricia Gaines resigned from the board 6 weeks later. That was how he kept the door closed. He had done it before. He knew exactly how to do it. I want to tell you about one night in February. It was cold, the bone-settled cold of an Illinois winter that no amount of hide inside quite fixed. I sat at my kitchen table with the Robert's Rules of Order, the folder of financial documents, and a cup of tea that went cold before I touched it. And I thought about just stopping, resigning the board seat, selling the house, moving on. Now, I thought about it seriously for about an hour. Then I thought about Don Nakamura, the pharmacist who left without a word, and Patricia Gaines. And I thought about all 240 families paying $310 a month, trusting that someone was watching the money. And I thought, someone is going to find this eventually. It might as well be someone who knows what they are looking at. I stopped defending myself. I started building a case. Donna filed a formal complaint with the Illinois Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division in March of 2020. We submitted 46 invoices, 3 years of audited financial statements we had commissioned independently, the Reserve Fund study board meeting minutes showing 6 years of budget approvals, and vendor contracts signed by Craig without disclosure or competitive process. Every line sourced, every dollar traced. They were 46 documents at that point. I counted them more than once. Donna had a contact in the AG's office who handled HOA complaints. He called her 2 weeks after filing, had asked for the corporate registration of Hartfield Property Services. He already had a question about it. That told me something. Here's what I need you to understand about the law, because this is the piece most homeowners never know. HOA board members hold a fiduciary duty to the association and its members. That duty has 2 core components: the duty of care, meaning you make reasonable decisions, and the duty of loyalty, meaning you do not use your position to benefit yourself or your family financially without full disclosure and membership approval. When Craig signed contracts with his brother's company year after year without disclosing the relationship to the board or the membership, he violated that duty of loyalty on every single transaction. The association had civil grounds to seek recovery of the overpaid funds, and depending on what the AG found, there was potential for criminal referral to the state's attorney. Knowing your rights inside an HOA does not require a law degree. It requires reading the document you signed when you bought your house. The CC&Rs are a contract. Everything the board is allowed to do and everything it is prohibited from doing is in that contract. Most homeowners hand them the envelope at closing and put it in a drawer. Craig found out about the AG complaint within a week. I do not know how. In the 2 weeks that followed, he filed an emergency motion with the board to remove me from my seat, citing a provision in the bylaws about member conduct disrupting the governance process. Donna reviewed the provision in one afternoon. It had no application to what I had done. I filed a written response citing the specific bylaw language. The motion was withdrawn. He spent 2 weeks on a procedural threat that accomplished nothing. We spent one afternoon on it. While he was doing that, we kept building the case. But I want you to understand what I was facing heading into the final stretch, a court-adjacent hearing in 6 weeks. A man who had been doing this for at least 6 years, who had access to association funds, legal resources, and a board he had stacked over time, and 240 families who did not yet know any of this was happening. 1 week before the annual meeting, I found an unsigned letter in my mailbox. It told me very calmly to think carefully about whether I wanted to continue making enemies in my own neighborhood, that my car had been observed at a certain attorney's office on 2 occasions in the past month, that it would be worth considering whether this fight was worth the cost. I kept the letter. It went into the folder. We had 47 documents. 2 weeks before the meeting, Donna's contact in the AG's office had obtained, through a records request, a text message exchange between Craig and Dale Hartfield from August of 2018. Craig had written, "I need 3 more invoices this quarter. Keep them under 40 each," Dale had replied. "Same line items?" Craig had written back. "Same line items? 3 words." That was the whole plan. 3 words in a text message on a phone he apparently never thought to delete. I will tell you something about that moment. I was sitting in Donna's office in Schaumburg when she showed me the printout. I did not say anything for a little while because I had spent months building a case on financial inference, patterns in numbers, variance in payments, missing disclosures. And here it was, in 2 lines of text on a phone screen. He had written it down with his brother on a device the government could subpoena. The overconfidence of it is still something I think about. The annual meeting was held on the evening of April 15th, 2020, in the Creekside Terrace Clubhouse. 91 residents came. I had never seen more than 20 at a board meeting. Word had traveled in the weeks before. I did not ask how. I sat at the end of the long table with my folder, my laptop, and the Roberts Rules of Order. Craig sat at the other end in a blazer. He had 2 people with him I did not recognize. Men in suits, briefcases on the floor. His lawyers. He was composed. I will give him that. He came into that room composed. I presented the documentation for 41 minutes. I showed them the 6 years of invoices. I showed them the comparative bids, the $186,000 gap between what was paid and what was owed. I showed them the corporate registration with Dale Hartfield's name on it. I showed them the reserve fund balance dropping from $312,000 in 2013 to $68,000 in 2019, year by year on a single slide. So I showed them Clause 14B of the CC&Rs, the audit requirement that had been quietly ignored since 2014. And then I showed them the text. I need 3 more invoices this quarter. Keep them under 40 each, same line items. The room was quiet in a particular way. Not the quiet of shock, the quiet of comprehension. When 90 people understand something at the same moment, the air changes. Craig did not speak during the presentation. At a certain point, I want to be precise about this because I was watching. He picked up his phone, set it back down, and placed both hands flat on the table in front of him. His composure stayed in place, but the thing behind it left. There is a difference. I have sat across tables from CFOs who had that look. It is the moment a person stops calculating a way out and realizes there is no calculation left. The vote on the $400 special assessment, 81 against, 7 in favor, it did not pass. A special meeting was called the following week to remove Craig Hartfield from the board presidency. He submitted his resignation before the vote was convened. The Illinois Attorney General's office referred the matter to the Will County State's Attorney for criminal review. The association filed a civil suit seeking recovery of the $186,000 in documented overpayments, plus legal fees and interest. The case settled 14 months later. Craig Hartfield paid back $211,000. He has not held a board position in any homeowners association in Illinois since. I want to tell you about the morning after the annual meeting. It was a Saturday. I woke up early before the light. I made coffee and I sat at my kitchen table and I picked up the Roberts Rules of Order. I looked at the cracked spine. I had bought that book because I believed that if you learned the rules of a thing, you could hold people to them. I still believe that, but I also learned something harder. Rules only protect the people who are reading them. When everyone else puts the documents in the drawer, the person who doesn't put them in the drawer is the only thing standing between the rules and the people who know you won't enforce them. They were sipping champagne at a board gala the month I joined. I was at my kitchen table at midnight reading the Illinois Condominium Property Act. That is not a complaint. That is the job. That is what protection actually looks like from the inside. Gave the Roberts Rules of Order to the new board president, a woman named Renata Kowalski, who had been coming to meetings for 2 years and asking quiet, consistent questions. She looked at it like she was not sure she wanted the responsibility. I told her that was exactly the right instinct to have going in. It turned out to be exactly my area. Here's what I want you to carry with you. Whether you already own a home in an HOA or you are thinking about buying one, before you close on any property governed by a homeowners association, request 3 years of independently audited financial statements. Not the internal financial, the board prepares the independently audited ones. If the HOA cannot produce them, or if audits have not been conducted as required by the governing documents, that is a material warning sign. Second, request the most current reserve fund study and compare the recommended reserve balance against what is actually in the account. If the actual reserve is below 70% of the recommended level, ask for an explanation in writing before you sign anything. Third, look up every vendor the HOA has paid in the last 3 years. Search the business names against the names of current and former board members. If the association is not disclosing vendor relationships in board minutes, it is not an oversight. It is a choice. Fourth, read the CC&Rs before you close. All of them, every page. Highlight what you do not understand and get answers. Your signature at closing is your acceptance of every single covenant in that document. You cannot claim you did not know what you agreed to. Your money in that reserve fund is not abstract. It is the roof over your neighbor's head when the community pools surround cracks, when the retaining wall fails, when the parking structure needs repaving. It is collective infrastructure. It belongs to every homeowner in the development equally. The board is not the owner of that money. They are the stewards of it. There is a difference, and that difference has legal weight in every state that governs HOA operations. Most homeowners hand an envelope to a moving box and never open it again. I am asking you to open it, not because I want to frighten you, because what is inside that envelope belongs to you, and what you do not read, someone else will use against you. My mother taught me that. My name is Fatima Khalil. I am 57 years old. I still live in Naperville, Illinois. The reserve fund at Creekside Terrace is sitting at $289,000 and growing, and we have our first independent audit in 7 years scheduled for this coming fall. I did not walk away from what I found. And I do not regret a single highlighted page.